Hi everyone, it's Shari Carroll for SimonsSaysStamp.com, and I have a color coordinates for you, and this one I'm titling Thanksgiving. These colors remind me of either napkins or plates that I've seen at Thanksgiving or even a cornucopia. So I have pre-stamped my leaves onto some Desert Storm cardstock. And I'm going to be doing another technique once I'm done, and I'm using the Tim Holtz leaf prints. These are really gorgeous leaves, and they're really beautiful to overlay on top of each other. So I have stamped my colors on top of each other just to fill it in a little bit. So the colors I'm using is dark chocolate, burnt orange, merlot, olive, and deep purple. And to me, these just really represent Thanksgiving and fall colors. When I stamped my panel, I pretty much used one ink for one leaf print and then just continued on around. And I did let those inks overlap, and I also left some of that Desert Storm showing in between. Next, I'll be doing some embossing over top, so I make sure these inks dry really well, and right now I'm using my anti-static pouch, some clear ink from Simons Says Stamp, and I'm going back in with the leaf prints. It's really important to let your inks dry because you don't want the embossing powder to stick on anything that is kind of wet. So I'm going to ink that up really well. I think the hardest part is determining what angle to put your leaves at, and I do like to mix it all up so it doesn't look like any of the leaves are going in the same direction. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp onto this panel with that clear ink. I'm pressing down really good just to make sure I get that ink really well on there. And you can almost see the watermark that starts to happen as you stamp onto those inks. But I'm going to be using the Simons Says Stamp Fine Detail Gold embossing powder, and I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle this on. At this point, if your panel wasn't dry, that embossing powder would stick everywhere onto those other inks. So I gave that a quick inspection, heated up my heat gun, and now I can go ahead and melt that embossing powder. And you can start to see the shine come through on that leaf print, and it's absolutely really gorgeous. So you see the leaf underneath and then also the shiny leaf on the top. So I'm going to stamp a couple more of the gold leaves and then on to the next technique. The next thing I'm going to do, which is going to be really interesting, is to use some clear embossing powder. So I've already stamped this onto the panel, and right now I'm just going to go ahead and spread the clear right on. You can stamp over your gold, it doesn't matter. It's all mixed in together into this background. So this is giving me a watermark look right now, but once I go ahead and heat up my heat gun and emboss this, you can see this little area down here. It does darken the color of the original ink, so it gives me yet another layer of a leaf. It also darkens the Desert Storm paper, so that just gives me a really nice shiny look and also another layer. I'll be adding a few more of these clear leaves around on the panel. So I've done one on the bottom left. I'm going to go ahead and lift this up for you so you can see just the different dimension you get just with the clear embossing powder. I've decided I'm going to use my panel as a frame. So I have my rectangle stitch die here, and I've just taped that down in place. And now I'll run this through my die cut machine. I'm ready to start some assembly on this, and so here is the frame. I have gold embossed a leaf onto a little piece of Desert Storm cardstock, just a scrap, and that is going to sit behind the window. I also have a panel of cardstock here, and I have colored this with my ink blending tool and the burnt orange ink. You could just do the edges if you want, but I went ahead and did the whole panel because I didn't know what I'd be doing with this. I'm adding some fun foam to the back of my panel. I've just used my tape runner and cut some strips of that fun foam so that will have a little bit of dimension, and make sure that's all pressed down. And so that'll sit up from that leaf panel that I've made for inside the window. So to stick that on, I'm going to add my adhesive to the front of this. I'm just going to go along the edges. I've noticed trying to use my tape runner on the fun foam, it doesn't want to stick. It just kind of doesn't do anything. It repels it almost. So to put these together, I'm going to lay that leaf down, kind of line it up. I do use my grid quite a bit, but I'm going to line that up, and then I can just hold my window or my panel over top. Once I'm happy with that placement, I can go ahead and press everything down. And then I'll add some adhesive to that panel of burnt orange cardstock that I've colored and put that onto a top folding Desert Storm card. So I do want to add a little bit of twine, and this is just a really nice orange cord actually. It's a little bit thicker than twine. So I'm going to wrap this around the whole front of this card, and I'm going to wrap this around twice. So just wind it around. I kind of hold it with my thumb on that right side until I get that length, and then I can go ahead and use my scissors and clip that off. Rather than trying to tie a bow, I've just done a little square knot and then I straighten out my strings. At this point, I felt my card needed a little bit something more, so I'm using the wildflower dies from Tim Holtz. And I've cut out one of the flowers and I'm coloring it with my Copic markers. So this is the YG93 I'm using for the stem and the greens. Another darker color for that would be the YG95, which I did go in later and use. I'm adding a little bit of orange, and this is the E08 brown Copic marker, and it's actually a really nice rust color. And this really complements also the YR18, which is a little bit lighter than that. So I'm going to go and put in some of the YR18 in the center of my flowers. So this is pretty basic coloring. I'm not doing anything fancy, just getting the flowers and the greens colored in and trying to add a little bit of depth between those greens. So once I have my flower colored, I can go ahead and put it into the frame. And I'm going to use a little bit of foam squares and just lift that up a little bit. And one of the final touches that I'm going to do is to use a strip, and these are from the Tim Holtz Small Talk stickers. And these are really nice. They have really great messages that are more small talk instead of chit chat. So I've put some foam squares on part of this so that it can sit down into that frame, and then part of it will sit on top. So once I get a few of these peeled off, I can go ahead and place it right onto my card and make sure I have it lined up. At this point, I have everything mounted in place, and I thought I would show you on video how this looks. You can see the shine from all that embossing. It's really beautiful. So here is how the card looks finished. I did go back in and add some glossy accents just to the flower portion only of that die, and the colors just really pop, especially in photography. So you can see the different layers that all of those inks and embossing powders create. I'm really pleased at the color choices for this one, and it does really say Thanksgiving to me. So I hope I've given you some inspiration on a color coordinates combination of colors. And as always, thanks so much for watching.